welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man that is going to be doing nothing but curls and push-ups while recording this episode. It's Phil Briggs.
Hey, what's going on, buddy? Thanks so much for having me.
What are you on, like?
I am fired up. I could be probably doing curls and push-ups while talking the entire time. That's how excited this movie has got me.
Are you doing pull-ups right now in the backyard on the swing?
Yeah, you know what? I got to be honest with you. The kids' swing set in the backyard is getting pretty old and rickety at this point. So I go out there and I'm doing my pull-ups and I'm hearing lots of like creaking and cracking noises and starting to get nervous, not even just for myself, but like for the safety of my children on their swing set. So, you know, I might have to look into that.
Yeah, you want to be the one who breaks it, not them, right?
Yeah, exactly. If anyone's going to get injured on the children's swing set, let it be the, you know, full-grown adult man.
Well, dude, that's what this movie does to you, though. This movie, because, all right, so a little bit of history here. You and I are both fans of MMA.
Yes.
We both trained MMA.
Yep.
Like, I wrestled in high school. I boxed. So I wrestled and boxed before I did MMA, like,
okay,
for a while. And I've always, like, I actually missed this movie. So actually, but also Phil and I, before every kind of UFC fight, actually Bellator, like, we know all about Pride, like, so we're not just like UFC, we understand that there's mixed martial arts, MMA, all that kind of stuff. But we always talk about fights coming up, we give our predictions, like, who will win, who won't. And I don't know how it happened, but I actually missed Never Back Down in 2008. I moved to Korea in February 2008, and this came out a month later. After that.
Okay.
So I didn't even know about this movie until I got back home to the States, and it had been probably several years, and there's a writer, one of my favorite writers, called Shea Serrano, and he's
I know Shea. Yeah, the Ringer. Yeah,
he's awesome, and he's a huge fan of this movie, and he thinks Ryan McCarthy is just an A1 movie villain. So I was like, well, I gotta watch this. And I watched it, and I'm like, Djimon Hounsou? Oscar-nominated actor Djimon Hounsou's the coach in this? I was like, there are fights that get won by leg locks, arm bars, triangles. Like, there's combinations in this that win fights. And I dig it. Like, it's actually like, it's filmed kind of like an MTV music video, but it's aimed towards the kids. This isn't Warrior. Like, this is Never Back Down. Right. So the long story short, you and I got talking about it. And since you're an MMA fan, I'm an MMA fan. We've already covered Warrior on the podcast. So I'm like, let's do Never Back Down. Let's talk about it. And you were all about it.
I was all about it. And yeah. And so for me, my experience with this movie, like, was right in the, I don't know, I'd say the absolute like peak of my MMA training. The fandom is still going strong, but really, like, I started training MMA when I was, like early 20s, I guess. I was walking down the street at one of those like small town festivals. We had this festival in the town that I grew up in called the Strawberry Festival every summer. And it was one of those festivals where, like, you know, the folks come and they set up their tables to sell like knockoff sunglasses and, like, you know, beads and jewelry and this sort of thing. And all then the local businesses, you know, have tables set up and are, you know, doing promotions and whatnot. And I was walking down the street and happened to notice that one of the tables was a new MMA gym that was going to be like opening like right in my town. And so they were kind of standing there chatting with people. And I was like, this is opening in my town, like right here, like sign me up. Like I was the first person to sign up. I showed up. I was the only person that came to the first class. And what was kind of cool actually though was the gym, the coach at the gym was kind of like a Djimon Hounsou to a certain degree. He was, an actual professional MMA fighter that ended up actually having a few fights in the UFC. And so it was an amazing gym, and eventually more people started coming. And so, you know, that really like was just an incredible experience all around. I just loved it so much. And so this movie came out in 2008 after I'd been training for a few years. And so like I'm 99% sure I went and saw it in theaters, and then the second it was out on DVD, I actually noticed, so I own it on DVD, and I bought it used from Blockbuster, which was kind of hilarious, you know, again going back to 2008 to see a Blockbuster sticker on the cover of my DVD.
Yeah, I bought the Beatdown edition, the Blu-ray, and I guess they have a new sound mix where the punches have more pop and the crunches have more crunch. But okay, so this is '08. So by this time, I mean, David Loiseau had fought for the title, or had fought Rich Franklin. GSP was just storming people. You had a pretty strong group of of Canadians fighting. And I'm not saying like that, but you had a pretty, like, I just remember being in the States and just like going, I want to be in Canada for a GSP event because
Yeah.
he sold out that dome, right? Didn't he have a sellout arena for one of his fights? And
So yeah, he sold out the Rogers Center in Toronto, which I live just north of Toronto. So at the time, I believe it was a UFC record, something like 55 or maybe 57,000. But get this, so my MMA coach fought on that same card at the Rogers Center on the undercard. He unfortunately suffered a loss, but still just like an amazing connection there. And yeah, I mean, in and around that time, Dana White, the president of the UFC, referred to Canada as sort of the mecca for MMA. Now, I think there have been, according to him, a few different meccas for MMA.
Whatever makes money at the time, right?
Yeah, but at the time, that was when MMA, like you'd go out to like your local bar on a Saturday night, and they'd be showing the pay-per-views, and the place would just be packed. And so, yeah, we had some really strong Canadian MMA fighters, like George St. Pierre, David Loiseau is another good example. I'm trying to think of who else would have been big at the time, but it was in and around that time as well that the events became legalized up in Canada, and so the UFC came to Montreal for their first event ever in Canada. They went to this place called the Bell Center in Montreal. And so actually myself and the guys from my MMA gym made the drive out. And so I was there for the rematch between George St. Pierre and Matt Serra when
the smushing.
GSP regained his title.
Yeah, knees to the body from what I remember.
Knees to the body. Yeah, that's right.
Now, while watching this movie, I got to tell you, man, so I phonetically wrote his name down and I listened to an interview, but it's Gigandet. So Cam Gigandet in this movie as Ryan McCarthy, he's a good MMA villain in this. The kicks, the grappling. Now, listen, you and I so I was reading this MMA article about this movie, and they're kind of saying that, oh, well, it's unbelievable. But of course it's unbelievable because it's a movie. You don't want a grappling fest for 25 minutes on an hour and 40-minute long movie. You need to make some flourishes. You need some capoeira. You need some flips. You need some Superman punches because this was for the MTV crowd. So even though the MMA isn't like, oh, it's so MMA, I still feel like it's really represented. And the movie that everyone talks about being the standard bearer of MMA is Warrior. But I mean, watching Tom Hardy steamroll through two people in 10 seconds and then watching Joel Edgerton just get steamrolled by people and fight his way through. Now, I know Mark Coleman had like a good run through those tournaments, but that's not much more believable either. So, I mean, this is just a different MTV era-esque movie, but I dig the MMA, and I think Cam Gigandet, I believe him in this film. Like, he seems like a kid who could step into the 135, 145 division. Well, how much does he weigh in this? 145, 155?
He looked pretty slim. Like, I would say probably, like, I think, we're dealing with, bantamweights here, 135 pounds, something like that.
Yeah, he looked like he could step in that division, and it's still acting. But watching the behind the scenes stuff, and I also learned that the fight choreographers, this guy, Damon Caro, he's done like Army of the Dead, Justice League, 300 before this, Sucker Punch, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The other guy, John Eusebio, he's doing Matrix 4 right now. But before this, he had done 300, Bourne Ultimatum. So they had a legit group of MMA fighters in this movie and like choreographers. So it's cool. I don't know. Just watching it, I love it. What do you think about the MMA in this movie?
Yeah, so I'm 100% with you. I think that article, I completely disagree. I thought that this movie, this and Warrior, are the two movies that, in my opinion, are the best representation of MMA. I totally agree. I mean, yeah, is it realistic? Are we going to get into like a grappling stalemate or anything like that? Of course not. Nobody wants to watch that in a Hollywood movie. But you know what? You mentioned it. Like, there's some good combinations. There's some good, there's some leg lock submissions, some arm bars, some triangles. There were lots of realistic positions. So some of the sweeps as well, like in the grappling sequences, I thought seemed pretty realistic. The other big thing that I noticed and I really liked, compared to what you tend to see in Hollywood, boxing movies are typically very bad for this. you saw some defense. Like some
Yeah.
of these guys have their hands up and are blocking some punches, which, like this is the one thing where like the Rocky movies, for example, maybe don't hold up quite as well with the fight scenes because the defense is just non-existent.
When they are trying to knee people in the face in this movie, people block. And it's refreshing. Yeah. And I also love, now listen, a lot of people were also going at this movie because they're just, it borrows so many conventions. Like sure. It's very cliched. But watch any sport movie. I mean, when you tell a sport movie based on a true story, you're doing nothing original. You're just telling a true sports story. When you are doing a tournament movie, there's a bad guy, there's a good guy. And the good guy learns a lesson and is probably pretty angry. And then they get through the tournament and they learn a lesson. Like, so that's another thing that they're just talking about the conventions in this movie. But I mean, I'm totally flying. I'm totally fine with cliches and tropes as long as they're done well. So I liked Djimon Hounsou.
As long as sorry to jump in, but as they put some, as long as they, like this movie, like again, going back to 2008, there are some very distinctively sort of 2008 flavors that are added into this movie. So I'm with you. We got some familiar beats, some familiar tropes, but there are enough things that are unique to this movie. I mean, the soundtrack. I was
Rise Against, Under the Knife.
What was that?
The Rise Against song, Under the Knife. I love that song.
It was amazing to me to go back and watch this movie. It's the first time I've probably seen this movie 30 times, but this was the first time that I watched it in maybe 10 years. And the music took me right back to like the exact type of music, and Rise Against in particular, the exact type of music that I was listening to a lot in and around that time while I was training. And so, it's a familiar story, sure, but there's enough happening here that I think makes this unique and a lot of fun.
I like that they had Kanye, they had Soulja Boy, they had Stronger, Red Jumpsuit Apparatus, Rise Against, My Chemical Romance.
That's right.
But it was cool how they did the hybrid of, they did stay away from the nu metal. Well, actually, nu metal was early 2000s. This is more of the kind of Red Jumpsuit Apparatus time. But I liked, I don't know, it was fun. Rise Against and Kanye on the same. Those were both albums that I listened to all the time. So Absolutely. You're right. Going back, so what's funny? I still have that Rise Against album in a CD jacket, and it's buried in one of my closets in the back of a closet, and I went and found it and just started blaring it on CD because of this movie.
So I guarantee you I have that Rise Against album in a CD jacket, like under the passenger seat of my car right now. Still, probably dig it out.
And you know what my favorite part was this? So there's kind of 3 fights in this movie between Jake Tyler and Ryan McCarthy. One's a mini fight, but I like in their first fight when McCarthy lands the leg kicks on Tyler.
Yes.
Because that also brought me back to when I first got a leg kick and I thought I was going to die with that. And then the second fight, what I like between them is this is after Jake is beaten up. They call it the college guy fight on the commentary, and there's no music on it, by the way. It's kind of like a violent, bloody, very Florida fight. And I grew up in Florida, man, and during the whole commentary, they were complaining about how hot it is. I'm like, it's hot. And I guess the first AD passed out one day. I was like, okay, that's really hot. Because if you hear about someone passing out on set and it's the first AD, because they're supposed to be like the toughest generals of the set, then you know it's hot. I was like, okay, that must have been exceptionally hot. But they, so the second fight, Jake had beaten up those college kids. But I like that McCarthy still hands it to him in that bathroom. He does the leg sweep and just owns him. So he's like, listen, you can beat up college kids, but you're not trained. And I like the psychology of that as far as MMA and just coming off the streets. And then the final fight, I dug that he was angry. Like, he was mad. And the way they fought. And then he eventually lost. Like, I dug that. Like, I like how he lost in that fight. And I don't know. I like the story it told between that. So Jake gets whomped by McCarthy. And then Jake thinks he's tough. McCarthy wipes him out easier. And then eventually Jake gets the win at the end because he's just matured and figured out how to fight. And then he also used that sweet combo with the head kick KO. But it's I like the story that told. And I know we're jumping all over the movie, but